OK, let's turn to the day's business news now, and Stephen Carl is with us in studio for that. Stephen, we're going to start with news that Amazon is going to increase pay for its staff.
That's right, there's been a broad welcome for the move. It's going to affect some 300,000 staff around the world. In the United States, the minimum wage for Amazon workers will rise to $15 an hour and to £9.50 in the UK. Now, it's estimated the move will cost the company more than $1 billion a year, but that would be less than 1% of its annual revenues. Unions representing staff still say there's a lot more that Amazon needs to do for its workers, but the move is a boost for the campaign to increase the national minimum wage in the US, which stands at $7.25. Selena Sykes has more.
Amazon employees weren't the only ones happy to learn they'll be getting more money in their pockets. The pay hike, which will see the minimum wage increase to $15 in the US and £9.50 in the UK, has won praise from politicians, including one of the online retail giant's most vocal critics.
I want to give credit where credit is due. And I want to congratulate Mr. Bezos for doing exactly the right thing.
Estimated to cost $1 billion, the extra pay won't come cheap. But the move could win over customers and boost sales, as was the case for Walmart when it raised its minimum wage in 2016. Amazon's new pay rates, cannily timed ahead of the Christmas shopping season, will also pile the pressure on other retailers to follow suit in order to attract employees in an increasingly competitive labour market, with companies including Gap and Macy's seeing a fall in stocks on Tuesday after the announcement.
We also encourage other large employers to match that number. We think it would be great for those companies to do that. As for the overall federal minimum wage, we think that's for Congress to decide.
For workers' representatives, the pay raise is a start after years of criticism over working conditions and Amazon's failure to recognise unions.
Well, that news did have an impact on Wall Street, as we were just hearing in that report. So other main US retailers, Target, Gap and Macy's, all seeing their shares fall after that news. Amazon's down slightly as well, it should be said. Now, this is largely to do with the chase for employers. Target, for example, wants to hire 120,000 seasonal workers this year compared to Amazon's 100,000. They're competing essentially for the same people. So this move from Amazon putting the pressure on those other retailers. We'll turn next to Italy, where reports say the government will bow to EU pressure and cut its budget deficit from 2020. The country's borrowing costs had jumped after Rome announced that its deficit would rise to 2.4% of GDP next year. Sources within the Northern League party saying the government will now cut the deficit to 2.2% in 2020 and 2% in 2021. Italy's Prime Minister is to hold a meeting of ministers later to discuss their budget targets for the coming years. Let's see how that news is going down in the stock markets today. The Italian market getting a boost at the open, up over 1% in trading. The London FTSE maybe you can see there, the Milan FTSE maybe up over 1.4% at the open today. Gains too in Paris and in London. The German markets are closed today for a holiday. On the Italian markets, it is the banks that are seeing the biggest gains. In Intesa Sanpaolo, for example, up over 3% in trading. In London as well, it's the first day's trading for the luxury car maker Aston Martin. Their shares opening a little bit up at the start of the trading day. Over in Asia, the main markets in the red, those that were open. Trade fears weighing on Hong Kong, again down around 1/5%. The Nikkei in Tokyo down 2%, but Shanghai and the Kospi in Seoul both closed for public holidays. On the currency markets, the euro had been affected by those fears over Italy's budget. It's slightly recovering from the weaker position that it had yesterday, still trading just under $1.16 and a euro worth 89 pence sterling as well. Next, the electric car maker Tesla says it finally met its production targets for the Model 3 car in the last quarter. The company produced just over 53,000 of the vehicles over the 3-month period, up from around 28,000 in the previous quarter. But Tesla did warn that it's still struggling to get the cars to customers because it's short of trailers to deliver them. This latest report coming during a tumultuous period for Tesla after its CEO Elon Musk settled a securities fraud lawsuit. Now, as the British Prime Minister seeks to unite her party over Brexit, ports here in France are preparing for the worst. They're hiring hundreds of new customs officers in the event that extra checks will be needed on goods arriving from the UK after it leaves the European Union. Catherine Viette has the story.
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's what France's budget minister says he's doing as he announced plans to hire 700 additional customs officers in anticipation of a no-deal Brexit. With just 6 months left until the UK exits the EU, more questions than answers remain.
We have to figure out where customs checks will take place. Will it be on both sides of the border, on the French and British side? Will the British conduct checks on goods as they do with people in France? Or will we also be able to do checks on the British side, and particularly in Dover?
New scanners will also be brought in to examine the content of freight trains traveling through the Channel Tunnel. French port officials say they're reassured by the government's plans.
I'm expecting a hard Brexit. I'm not expecting a deal. If there are some arrangements, that's great.
Each year, more than 4 million trucks pass through Dover and Calais, carrying billions of euros worth of goods. Any additional border checks could mean additional time, and that costs money.
The worst nightmare is a complete standstill and that we won't be able to send goods to Britain, whether there is a deal or not.
And a no-deal Brexit could affect flights too, with EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker warning planes could be grounded or additional screenings required for transfer passengers.
Staying in France, the National Assembly here will today debate the privatisation of state-owned stakes in a number of companies. The stakes to be sold off include parts of Paris's airports operator, the National Lottery, and the energy company Engie. Now, the government says it wants to raise funds to invest in the future. And finally, from me, we've gotten the first glimpse of what a transport would look like on the high-speed Hyperloop train. The 32-metre-long passenger capsule was unveiled in Spain on Tuesday. It'll eventually form part of a longer train that will run on these high-speed tracks. It gets shipped to Toulouse next for final assembly before being tested on those tracks. Hyperloop aims to move passengers at a speed of more than 1,000 kilometres per hour using low-pressure tubes. The company says that it will be ready for passengers next year, although there are only currently test tracks in development. Lots of people interested in the idea of a Hyperloop. Las Vegas to LA in 20 minutes is the promise.
It's not bad, is it?
Could work very well.
Yeah, and I mean, why not? Why not? I'm all for it, I have to say. Hop down to Barcelona for the day. Stephen Carroll, thanks a lot for that business update.